It's not that your dollar isn't important, but it's not all on you and your dollar to fix climate change. It's not all on you and your dollar to fix racism. It helps, but we almost have to do a parallel path. I'm thinking of like gas and brake. One side, you got to think about the fact that there are ways that we can influence those in power that don't have to do with our dollars and put the accountability on those in power.
Hey, journeyers. Welcome to the Journey to Launch podcast. We have a special guest, Berna Anat. She is an award-winning producer, speaker, podcast host, rich auntie in training, and financial hype woman. She's a proud Filipino-American daughter of immigrants, born and raised in the Bay Area. She taught herself how to pay off over $50,000 of debt, and her debut book is coming out, Money Out Loud, which, oh my gosh, I can't wait to talk more about that with you, Berna. She's been on the podcast before in episode 108, so we definitely dive back into more of her origin story there, but I'm so excited to welcome Berna back on the podcast. So welcome, Berna.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamila. This is incredible. I'm happy to be back, and I will come back as many times as you allow me. I'm going to be annoying.
No, so here's what I love about you, Berna. You just bring a light to money and fun, but like you kind of trick people in a way. Let me explain. So you make money and conversations around money very lighthearted and fun and approachable, but then it's still heavy stuff that's important and very well thought out. Like, I'm always impressed with the way you communicate just money topics and teaching money to your viewers, right? Or to your audience. And I just want to say, like, not a lot of people can do that. And so, make money fun and digestible that people want to pay attention and think differently. And so I'm so excited for like your next level, right? On the podcast before that episode, you talked more about paying off debt and making money fun. And since then, because I forgot when we recorded that, you've done so much. I think you hosted a podcast since then. You wrote your book. You've grown as an entrepreneur. So it's like, I want to talk to you about all those things and really just dive deeper into your evolution so far, from when you first started in the space and what you've learned. And so if you can just give us like a quick just background of how you got here. I know that's a lot. And then we can get into the juicy stuff.
Of course. I'm so happy to be a sort of Trojan horse of financial education. We're dressed up and like, we're going to have fun, we're going to get crazy. And then we're going to talk about capitalism and trauma and all that stuff. I think since we last spoke on this podcast, which was a while ago, I was probably focusing a little bit more on sort of more tactical things, budgeting, saving, debt. And with my book, Money Out Loud, of course, we definitely focus on that. But I would say with the podcast that I co-hosted and produced with Betches called Money Please, and then the book that I've written, Money Out Loud, one of my favorite things that I've dove into is the emotion behind it all, the trauma behind it all, the cultural and just sort of even spiritual, just sort of like whole identity that you could bring into money. And how important it is to bring our whole identity into money, not just looking for the tips and tricks, not just looking for the box to tick off, but to bring your whole self and your whole financial story into your money life. That's one of my favorite things that I've sort of dove into, and it's made it all much more juicy. I think on the podcast, I talked a lot about budgeting, saving, and debt, yes, but wanting to bring in community stories behind it. Like we can all list off our best budgeting tips, but I love talking about how people budget differently, why they budget differently, what parts of their identities and their culture, maybe the way that they were raised, what generation they're in, makes them budget or handle debt differently. And I just, money is this incredibly layered thing, and there are a million layers to peel off from there. So I feel like the longer I talk about money, the longer we're in this game, the juicier and juicier it gets. There's no end to what we can talk about here.
Yeah. And, like you just said, you get to the root of, while, we see the pretty flowers and leaves and we talk about that. I feel like what you do really well is you get to the root of what helps those those things blossom, or what keeps them
Hmm.
from blossoming, which
Yeah.
is really special. So with just one of the things you've been talking about more, which I can totally relate to, is just the immigrant experience. I
Yes.
forgot the term you used. You had a very popular video on your page about it, and so I want you to just explain the video in case people have not seen that video, and then I want to talk
Yes.
more about it because I'm sure so many people can relate to it.
Yes. So it is the first gen alpha kid experience. I think it's probably what I was referring to. It's so funny because I made that video. Of course, it's always like this, as a creator, it's always the videos that you're like, I look busted. It's an Instagram story. It's bad quality. I'm going to post it anyway. And then I guess I'll make it into a video because I'm getting lots of DMs about it. And of course, that is the video that goes bonkers. not the produced, scripted, beautiful 7 tips for da 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 video. It was a video of me at my parents' house on a random Saturday afternoon. And I was like, hey, what's going on with your Saturday? Sick. Oh, I'm spending my Saturday organizing and paying my parents' bills because they were in the Philippines for like 3 months, an indefinite amount of time. And, I'm looking at my parents' credit card debt, their mortgage, and everything, and having a teeny tiny panic attack, a teeny tiny breakdown. And, excuse me. And I was just sort of like first gen alpha kids check in. Like, I know this is an experience that's common for a lot of us, especially children of immigrants. First gen, I know that there's a few interpretations of that, but I interpret it as like the first generation to grow up in America, children of immigrants, and also the alpha kid. Oh, this is the one that really gets to my soul because it has a lot of financial implications, actually. The alpha kid is when you actually don't even need to have siblings to be the alpha kid. It's the one kid in your family that everybody depends on, like the generations depend on. You might be the family secretary, you're the family treasurer, you're the family party planner, you're the family like emotional DJ at every social event, you're the MC. And so many first gen children of immigrant folks could relate to that. I did not expect that video to do the numbers that it did, but man, people were unpacking their whole trauma in the comments. There were people who were like, hey, I'm in SoCal. Who wants to start a support group for us first gen alpha kids? Just in the comments. So clearly there's like an appetite to talk about that.
Yeah, so let's talk about it more. So
Oh my
as
God.
I first gen alpha kid myself, I'd love to
Yes.
hear, and I'll definitely post a link to that video in the show notes, and so you can see it if you haven't. But what were some of the emotions that you were doing the work? So what were
Yes.
you feeling as you were doing it? And I mean, you just recorded it, but you've been doing this for a while now. So let's
Yes.
talk about the emotions and the responsibilities layered upon you figuring out your own financial life, right? Like
Oh
what
my
that feels
gosh.
like.
Yes, absolutely. So you bring up an important point that this is something that a lot of us have been doing our entire lives. A lot of us, like since we were kids, we had some responsibility to shoulder with our families because if you're a child of immigrant parents, they have a whole bunch of stuff to figure out. A lot of the times there might even be a language barrier. And so they're depending on you, the kid that's speaking English almost 24/7, to translate things, to help like negotiate and facilitate things. And so I think one of the reasons that video went nuts is because we've all gotten to adulthood like doing these things kind of in private and not talking about it. And one of the things that I'm sure like everybody in the financial world talks about, especially BIPOC, is the fact that we don't talk about money stuff out loud. We do not talk about the fact that our parents have hella credit card debt, or their mortgages are wild, or they're paying too much for insurance, because our parents taught us not to. You don't talk about that in front of company. You know what I mean? These are the kind of things we keep very close. So even me making this like funny video about like, isn't it wild that sometimes we pay parents bills and these bills stress me out? People were like, it was almost like the very first time I ever posted a budgeting video. And what got me into the industry in the first place is the reaction of the community of just like, wait, we're we're allowed to talk about that? Like, it's almost like we're all looking around for our parents like ready to hit us with a slipper or like with a belt or something. I'm just like, what? Oh, I'm allowed to talk about how this is both upsetting, and you feel a sense of pride and honor to be able to do this for your family. You feel a sense of obligation. You feel a burden. You feel like you don't want to be ungrateful. And that's just the emotional layer of the action. Then there's the emotional layers of like the actual financial realities. A lot of the times, us first gen alpha kids, we're just trying to figure out our own financial stuff. Like we don't know what the hell is going on either. We were also failed by our educational systems. We didn't talk about it in our families. So now as adults, we're we feel like we're supposed to be past budgeting. We're supposed to figure out our debt. We're supposed to be figuring out our retirement. We're supposed to figure out investing. And at the same time, our parents are getting older. The older generations are approaching, actual retirement age or beyond. We might be talking about sort of end of life planning, and we don't know about that stuff either, and neither do they. So we're having to do this parallel pathing of like figuring out our stuff while helping them to figure out their stuff. And by the way, there's still that cultural like fence of like, yeah, we're going to have to deal with money, but still try to be polite in talking about it. You don't want to like go to your parents and be like, this is what I learned, so you got to do this again, slipper, belt, smack across the face or whatever, because we're still our parents' kids. We still have that feeling of like, let me be polite, let me come at this correct. A lot of us don't have, oh, it's time for like the family sit down about money and feelings. Like we still have to be sensitive while trying to get everything right for everybody. So it's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, add on like so they think I believe they call this the sandwich generation that takes care of elder parents, and then they have their
Yes.
own kids, so they're in the
Yes.
middle, just providing and wanting to provide care both up and down the
Yes.
generations, which can be a lot, especially if you don't have your own financial life situated. You don't feel financially secure. But I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of us grow up in culture. So as a in like a Jamaican or Caribbean culture, it is like you look out for each other. So the responsibility is for everyone to like kind of pitch in if someone can't do something, which I actually agree with. I think community and
Yes.
looking out for one another is important, but then it is an issue when it comes at the detriment of your own financial health, right? Or if
Mhm.
you're trying to help people who are self-sabotaging, or basically the efforts are not you're not seeing headway, right, with those efforts. I
Oh.
when I saw your post, one of the things I actually realized was the few times that I've had issues with family members was because of money. And on the
Mhm.
surface, it might have been other things, right? So there's other things on the like bubbling, not just the money, but because of other things. But then I was like,
Yes.
wait, wow, like it still came back to money, whether it was like I think you're suggesting this because you're going to benefit from it, or you gave me the wrong information, or it's not your
Oh.
place. And I didn't realize that. Like, I was like, wait,
Yes.
when I go back to the issues that I've had with family, like it's all been based on money. And, people view me and my family as someone who knows a lot about money. And I know enough, but I don't know everything. And so
Mhm.
I think it's interesting too, is that the perception of the alpha, or the person who's supposed to be smart, and either it can help you in a way because then people like learn to trust you, or you can
Mhm.
get people where there's a resentment that, hey, like, from other people, that way, why is she the one that you're going to, or how do you know that that's, the right choice to make? So I'd love to hear your thoughts more on that.
Whoa. See how there's like, it is a rainbow. It is a spectrum of like financial situations. Because again, sort of mirroring what I heard from you, there's an extra burden as the alpha kid. You're the alpha financial person in the family too. A lot of the times when you're the alpha kid, you're like, you're alpha because you're the best organizer, or you know all the things, or people are just used to depending on you. Then you add the layer of, oh great, Jamila is also the financial expert, so she can figure all this out for us. And also, maybe she loves it. I get that a lot from my family too. Just like,
Yeah.
you love money stuff, right? You do it. You should do it because you love money stuff. It's like, yes, and this is an extra job. Like, this is my job, and you're giving me more of my job to do. That is, it's so complicated. It's almost like impossible to pull the strings apart from the tangled ball of like, is this emotional resentment? Does this have to do with like patterns I saw in my childhood? Does this have to do with patterns that like our parents' generation saw from their parents? Or is this just straight up money? It's never just straight up money. It's never straight up about money because, like you said, a lot of the issues that you've had with family were money related. It's money plus shame. It's money plus
Mm,
embarrassment. It's money plus self esteem. It's money plus respect. Like, money is this wild magnet that just attracts every emotion and every feeling. And again, compounded by the fact that it's also like we're taught to feel shame around all of it. And so I feel like when you're someone like you, Jamila, in your family, where you're the alpha kid and you're expected to help and you're expected to have all the right answers, that doesn't mean that people are going to be like, great, Jamila, like you got it. You're so right. And it's all going to go great. They want your help, and they're going to project all of their negative and strange feelings about money onto you as well. And I think what's so hard about being first gen, especially sort of millennial, like you said, sort of sandwich is we are also the generation of just like therapy and trauma. We're unpacking all the things. I don't know about maybe this is true for you too, but I feel a lot of pressure to be compassionate and empathetic when other family members are like projecting their unhealed financial traumas onto me. Like if I'm feeling resentment, if I'm feeling, betrayal or anything like that, I also feel an extra pressure of like, because I understand what financial trauma is and I understand how like those experiences work, I'm like, okay, Berna, be patient. They didn't mean it. They come from a different place and a different time. Like they don't know that they're lashing out and projecting onto you, but it's still hard. That's an extra
Yeah.
burden that we carry. And so when you want to expand, like what do we do then? Like, okay, we talk to these family members about what we think they're going through? Because the whole problem of this is that we're not really talking about what the issues are, and we're taught not to talk about money. So it's really hard to navigate while still maintaining a semblance of like respect for each other and respect expected between the generations and between family members.
How did you navigate those conversations, or how do you recommend, right? Someone's listening and they're like, you know what? I know I need to have this conversation with, maybe a family member, parent, sister, brother. Should they even have the conversation? So there's the side of it where, you know what, I'm not going to ask until they ask me for help or
Mm,
until they come. And I kind of sometimes take that approach now based on my experiences where I'm not going to give unsolicited advice. Like if you
mm-hmm.
want my advice or you want to come to me, I will help you. I will go out of my way to help you. But otherwise, I don't necessarily, I'm not going to watch you drown and not help, but I'm also not going
Sure.
to overstep if I don't feel like you want my opinion. So
Mm-hmm.
in that case, how do you suggest to bring up these conversations? Should you wait until maybe they ask for help? What does that look like?
I think they're, of course, the most irritating, but usually the most true answer is it depends. But I fully understand the situation that you're describing of just like, yes, you might see family members making backwards financial decisions, or like you said earlier, which is so on point, self-sabotaging financial decisions. But I think one feature of being the first gen alpha kid, especially BIPOC and especially women of color, is that we have that instinct to like rescue everybody, help everybody, save everybody. Like it's our job, solicited or not. And I think it's really important to figure out where your boundaries are. Are you wanting to help that person in that moment because you care? And do you have the capacity to help that person in that moment? Capacity is something very difficult for us first gen alpha kids to calculate because we were raised like, oh,
Mhm.
oh, it's unlimited. When it comes to my family, it's unlimited. I'm supposed to bleed out for my family. I'm supposed to go hard. I'm supposed to empty the battery tank. And that's just full on not true. So I would say base level stuff, really like it's of course up to you with what you want to help, but like take a good look at your personal capacity and really figure out like, do I have the room in my life right now? If I want to help that family member with their credit card debt, I see that they're drowning. Do I have the room in my life to offer help unsolicited? And do I have the room for all the emotional complications that could come from that? We got to be real honest with ourselves about capacity. If we find that we have the capacity and we do want to help, even preparing ourselves for whatever emotional blowback might happen, whatever kind of financial empathy we need to like practice and breathe through when it does happen, I found that, for example, when I filmed that video about first gen and like being at my parents' house and seeing their credit card bills and everything, part of what was so difficult was like, you can't unsee those numbers, right? And so the next time I saw my parents and they came back from the Philippines, I wanted to talk to them about it, but I knew it would not do any good to be like, so you guys have hella credit card debt. Like, what the hell is that all about? That what you don't want is, at least for me, speaking for myself, I didn't want to put my family on their heels because
Mhm.
they might come like defensive. I didn't want one, I felt this is probably more first gen stuff that I have to unpack. I felt like wrong to like put my family members on their heels. Like it felt disrespectful. And two, I just like, I understand that debt and having financial issues doesn't make you a bad person, but I know that this generation didn't necessarily like hasn't necessarily done that sort of emotional work. So I know that they could get offended very quickly. And so the way that I like to approach it is there's two ways I like to approach it. You either could go like use yourself as an example, and that opens up the conversation. So for
Mhm.
example, you could go like, Yeah, I was paying your guys' like bills the other day, and credit card debt. I have credit card debt too. I actually have this much credit card debt. It's kind of rough, and I'm trying to figure out a good way to pay it off. Like, well, what are your guys' thoughts on credit card? Because I have it too, and here's what I'm doing. I've heard this conversation work for a lot of folks in terms of even like retirement planning and like investing. Oh, I just learned about a Roth IRA, and here's what it does. And I opened one. Like, do you all have anything uh like that, like coming from almost that position of humbleness of like, I'm learning, do you all know? Then you give them an opportunity to open up. Maybe they actually have more authority than you think. Or you can be like, well, if you don't, like, I'm down to try to figure this out for the both of us. Like, maybe we can parallel paths so that we are never in a position where I am above you. And the other way I like to go about it is to just like talk story. That's what we
Mm.
say in like Filipino culture. It's what they say a lot of the times in Islander culture, Hawaiian cultures, talk story, which means ask them to tell you a story about what's going on with their financial life as opposed to doing like the finger like this. So that's the way that I approached it with my parents. I was like, oh yeah, so I was paying your guys' bills. I noticed some interesting stuff. Like, what when did you guys get the TJ Maxx credit card? Like, what do y'all usually buy on? Is that where you got these things? Like, tell me about the last thing you bought on your TJ Maxx credit card that like you really really loved. And then we launched into this conversation about my mom is a big TJ Maxx. She's a Maxxinista, so she has lots to say about it, and lots to talk about. She talked a little bit about like when she reaches for it emotionally, like the card, how it stressed her out, and things like that. And it just softens the conversation a little bit to ask them storytelling questions versus like go straight to it. Those are a couple of things that I'm thinking.
Yeah, those were really actually good jumping off points or starting points for people. Something you said about capacity and not understanding our capacity because we push a lot. I find it that it's almost like this immigrant superpower. And
Mm,
not to, I think you could still have this not being an immigrant, but if you came or saw or were raised with hardworking parents, or
yes.
right, like I saw my mom like work really hard, and she did as much as she could for me,
Hmm.
and I was also a very busy kid. And I don't think I was overscheduled because we didn't have like money like that for me to be in everything. But she made
Yes.
sure to give me experiences. And I felt like that, for me, when I got to high school, college, when I had a packed schedule, when I was working, one or two jobs, then, going to school, then
Hmm.
practicing and doing gymnastics, I felt like that was fine to me. Like that was my life. So now as being a mom now, my kids, they do a lot. I don't
Yes.
necessarily think they're overscheduled. This might be also where it's like a superpower, but then also kryptonite is for me.
Yes.
I'm like, you need to be busy. Right? Like this
Hmm.
is how I was raised, and that's why I'm able to
Yes.
handle all that comes with me, right? Like I think before we
Yes.
got, so today was a really big like packed schedule for me. I did
Yeah.
career day at my kid's school twice, so I kind of had to go back and forth. Went to
Oh,
the gym,
nice.
have this interview, got to all before 2, and I got to go pick them up, and then we have something else. We have a bunch of things after this, and
Incredible.
I feel like I that's a superpower in a way to be able to handle all that. And not to say that I don't get sometimes stressed out and I peel back when I can't do that anymore. But I
Hmm.
think it's important to recognize, and it's the hardest thing to recognize when something is working for you. So whether that is this idea of hard work and pushing through and max capacity versus when it's actually hurting you, and whether that
Yes.
your psyche, your money, and how have you navigated that, right? As someone who probably was raised by hard workers,
Yes.
did a lot of hard work yourself, and now that you're kind of entering into this more awareness of how you want your life to be as you're stepping into
Hmm.
your own, like how do you manage taking what you need from those experiences versus leaving behind what doesn't serve you anymore?
Oh my gosh. Barely is the answer. I barely manage that because, like you said, I mean, I have very, very similar childhood as you. I am the alpha child, I'm the youngest daughter. A lot of the times when you're the youngest kid and you happen to be like academically like sound, you know what I mean? You have decent grades. Maybe this is the case with you too. Like my parents were like, "Oh, great! Like this is almost our last chance to get like the doctor or lawyer out of the family. So let's overschedule her. Let's put her in hula and tap dance and like math tutor. Da 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 da." And like you said, having this like very full schedule as a kid kept me very busy. And now I think it really helps in when I need to multitask. But my gosh, like it's exactly the point you made where it's your superpower and it's your kryptonite. we can turn that on anytime. Actually, the problem is we often don't know how to turn it off. That's the problem. Our default mode is hustle. Our default mode is multitask. And what I've learned, and mind you, I've only learned this because of therapy and a business coach who was also a first gen alpha kid unpacking her own stuff. I learned that I never learned how to rest. I
Mhm.
discovered that in my default state, which I've been in for 99% of my life, literally, like, my business coach has asked me like a few years ago, I accomplished some major thing in my work life and I like nearly killed myself doing it. And it was weeks of hustle, no sleep. And I finished it. And then Kristen, my business coach, was like, great. How are you going to celebrate? And I was like, what? She was like, how are you gonna celebrate? And I was like, I don't know. I think I'm gonna like have a nice meal and then like probably get drunk and like, and take a nap and whatever. She's like, okay, so you're gonna eat and then you're gonna sleep. Those are those are basic needs. Like I'm not asking you, I'm asking you how you're going to relax and recover, and then how are you going to celebrate? I was like, I don't napping. I don't know what you, and like basically I had to unpack it that like I literally don't know how to relax. My means of like the next thing I wanted to do after that activity was plan the next activity. And now that I've been unpacking it more with my therapist, with my business coach, I realized that this is like to measure my own capacity and also give myself permission to rest are literally skills I did not learn. And so I have to practice them like a toddler. Like I always tell my therapist, I feel like a baby deer. I feel like a baby giraffe of like, I'm like on unsure legs. And I'm like, I'll, lock my phone away and lay on my couch and be like, I think I'm resting. Am I resting right now? Am I resting good? Like, are we doing it? Or when I have this urge, I'm practicing listening to that urge of like, maybe not now, maybe I don't have capacity, like validating that urge and actually listening to it, because what we're used to doing is stuffing it down and being like, shut up, on to the next, on to the next. It's a practice just as much it would be a practice to get better at basketball or become a better singer. Like you have to feel weird about it first. It feels specifically wrong, but you have to keep trying.
Oh my gosh, I love that because this is me. Like when I don't have anything to do, I create nonsense for myself. I'm like, what are you do? What
Yes.
did you just spend the last hour doing? Go lay
Yes.
down. But no, here I am scrolling, which there's something to be said. Sometimes I feel like maybe it's a justification for my
Mm,
social media scrolling addiction, but I'm just
mhm.
like, you know what? This releases something in me. It's
It
helpful, but
does.
at some point, it's like Jamila, rest. But I think what you're bringing up is a great point. Is that it? What feels uncomfortable or in spaces where we don't know, right? Like things are just we're unsure what to do next. That
Hmm.
that it's okay to pause, right? Just like we would tell someone who's learning something financially for the first time, if they
Right.
don't get it, don't give up, like take your time, have that growth mindset. I think applying it to, and I hate using the word self-care sometimes because I feel like it's overused in a way
Yeah.
that hurts us.
Self-care.
But,
Yeah.
like caring for ourselves, because in a lot of ways, what helped us become who we are, because that's my big thing. It's like, this is what helped me become me. And so like, I
Yes.
want to keep that up. I want to keep that spirit. And but if I change it, will I still accomplish the things I want? And I'm learning that I will, right? I'm learning that there's another level that does not require this of me. And also remembering, so what you just said about your accomplishments, right? I also find that I have not celebrated a lot of the accomplishments. I just keep going because I'm just like, yeah,
Hmm.
that's what I was supposed to do.
It's what I do.
So,
It's what we
but
do.
there's so many people who do that same thing and don't realize how far they've come. So how have you, so I
Mm.
realized that you said, okay, so napping and like eating are not necessarily um, inherent things that you can do to celebrate. So what have you started to do to tap into more of what you really need to refuel, or just to tap out of business and life when you need to?
Of course. Oh my gosh. I actually, as you're talking about it, as you're asking that question, I know folks on the podcast can't see, but as you were saying, like, what do you do to tap in? And you were sort of like motioning to your body with your hands, like, and to your chest. That's what I do.
Mm.
I'm like, listen, this up here, my brain doesn't necessarily have the right programming all the time, because my brain is like, that's the one that's like, on to the next, let's do more. I saw a tweet the other day that was like, when I rest, sometimes I catch myself thinking of the most productive way to rest, which is the opposite of what it is. And that's what my brain wants to do. So I try to like almost shut my brain off and listen to my body instead. I have been thinking a lot and talking with folks a lot about like somatic responses and like
Mm,
somatic intelligence, meaning like basically meaning that your body knows better than your brain does a lot of the time. So when I sometimes it feels silly because it's a new practice for me, but I'll be like, shut up, brain. What does my body want to do? I think of like almost like the authority coming from my gut, my like the back of my spine. If these things had voices, what would they say? And I just do what they say because like 9 times out of 10, actually at this point 10 times out of 10, it's correct. Sometimes it's I want to lay down and nap. Stop looking at the screen. I just want to lay down and nap for like 10 minutes. Or dang, I really want to listen to like a specific like HER song and dance around. Like I need to freaking get the energy out. Or I'm hungry or I want sunshine. I want to go for a walk. Like I literally treat my body as something with a voice that's like, and she's trying to tell me something.
mm,
I not to say that you shouldn't trust your brain, but you know that that's a part of your brain, that's a part of your body that's been trained for productivity almost all the time. I love what you said too about like it's hard to turn that part of ourselves off because it got us to where we are. You are incredibly accomplished, right? And it's hard not to look at that and be like, it's because I was a hustler. It's because I didn't stop. It's because I'm productive. It's because I does this. Like this is the way I am. What I've learned, and again through the help of therapy and coaching and unpacking with other first gen BIPOC alpha kids, is that this version of us is not all of us. I had that exact same fear you said of
mm,
like, if I stop being this version of me, are all the good things going to go away? Who even am I if I'm not this like hyper productive version of me? I've learned to see that as like, that is a tool that I could turn on whenever I want, and I could also turn it off. Like, we can be this version of Berna and Jamila that, like, all we know is winning, all we know is accomplishing. And that's a mode that we can switch on, just like we could switch on Jamila is relaxing, Jamila is chilling, Berna is chilling, Berna is napping. Like, that's my work right now is trying to see these things not as my entire identity, but as a mode I could turn on and off depending on the situation. But again, baby giraffe, drunk toddler, like that's where I'm at in terms of progress.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the process of your book and getting it out into the world. One of the things that you did that I was just looking at you in awe about was, and you can explain more, but so I know that your publisher, like some of the workers in your publishing house, they went on strike, which
Yes.
impacted you. Like they literally were working on your book and they went
Yes.
on strike, and you went out like you were a voice for them. You helped support them. You said, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in support of my publisher for not supporting them, which I know
Mm-hmm.
had to impact like your book, and also just like maybe what you thought would happen like with the book. And I'm bringing this up because there's a lot of things that we may want to do or stand up for or want to voice our opinion on, and we are
Mm-hmm.
scared to do it because we're afraid to lose relationships or money or
Yes.
opportunities. So this can be in corporate America, right? You can see something going on that you don't like, and you want to stand up for it, want to be a whistleblower, or
Yes.
within your space as an entrepreneur, as someone that has a platform. So
Mm-hmm.
how did you reconcile, and maybe you didn't have to, maybe it was an easy decision, that you were going to
Mm-hmm.
speak up and speak out with the people who were working on your book to fight and help them fight for their rights? And like how were you so confident to do that without being afraid of what you could lose because of it?
Oh my gosh, I was absolutely afraid. The first feeling I felt was fear that I could lose all of it. I at any moment, like basically once I was very public about standing with the Harper Collins Union, standing in solidarity, I was like, this is it. It's refreshing my email, waiting for the publisher to be like, so you're dropped, you're
So wait,
done.
let's maybe go back because I don't know if I explained exactly what happened really good. So
Oh
maybe you
yeah.
can just like quickly say what happened, and there is a resolve, or hopefully they're working towards something. But yeah.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. So, in case anyone hates to wait for the ending, it's a happy ending. The HarperCollins Union did succeed. My team is back at work. All the union members on my team are all back at work, and they're fine. They found a fair contract. What they were fighting for initially, way back in November, was basically the 250 or so employees at HarperCollins who were part of the union had been actually negotiating for like almost 2 years to try to get a more fair contract. And what that means is raise the base pay, their minimum wage pay, for a sort of starting level editor in New York City, which was wildly low compared to, folks who live in New York City. It is so expensive to live there. And they also wanted more sort of in writing diversity initiatives and diversity hiring initiatives and just better benefits all around. And they were fighting for that, not just for HarperCollins, but knowing that HarperCollins is one of the biggest publishers in the world, they're really fighting to set the standard for the entire industry. And they got a lot of attention in November for being like, you know what? We're about to go on strike. We're going to do it. HarperCollins, don't call our bluff. HarperCollins is like, I don't care. And so the union workers went on strike. Again, they'd been negotiating for 2 years. This was their last straw because a strike then is supposed to bring public attention to what was going on behind the scenes. Everybody thought, okay, might be a couple weeks, whatever. I remember my editor was like, so listen, we're going on strike on this day. It's indefinite. Crossing our fingers, we're back in a couple of weeks. Cut to 2 months later. They were on strike for 2 straight months. HarperCollins didn't budge. It was one of the longest strikes in publishing history. And it was really scary because there were still books being made. There were still so many books being published and in the process of being published, including mine. And so it was a really wild time. And it took me a second, maybe a couple of weeks for when they were on strike. Part of me honestly was just like, I'm just going to hold my breath and not say anything about it until they're back. And, once there's a happy ending, I could be like, here's what happened, maybe, or I could just not speak on it. There was a point where I had to ask myself, at first gen alpha kid brain will catastrophize and be like, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? Am I willing to lose my book contract over this? Am I willing to lose the deal? I also had to realize and think about the fact that I'm writing a book about financial education, but the very last chapter is entirely about financial activism. It wraps up all of why all these other 6 chapters about financial how-tos were important. It's important because financial freedom gives you the ability to stand up for what's right. Financial activism gives you the ability to use your dollar to basically take back the power that other people had over you. That's exactly what they're doing in this strike. So I asked myself, like, it couldn't be more hypocritical. How could I be writing and then promoting a book about financial education and ultimately activism and turning a blind eye to the activism happening in my own publishing house, turning a blind eye to the people who are literally fighting for more dollars to live? Like, I'm like, I would hate myself for not speaking out, especially because, like, how can I stand on this platform if I'm not standing for the people who are trying to fight for exactly what this book is about? And so from there, it became a no-brainer. Honestly, there was a part of me that was like, you know what? If I go down as the person who loses her contract, who loses her book deal over financial activism, F it. Like, that's a whole other path we can go down. I'd be proud of myself. I'll know that, like, I refuse to bend to a system that was not being compassionate to the humans who work inside of that system. And I was honestly right. I was ready to ride. And I guess the only thing that helped me make that decision, honestly, was like, could I look my nieces in the eye and talk about my book about financial education and have them or one of their, like, younger friends be like, didn't HarperCollins, like, not pay their workers? Like, to be called out by the younger generation, to be called out by, like, even a younger version of myself who knew that this was messed up. That's what made me go, like, I can't go on book tours in, like, high schools and middle schools and have anybody be like, isn't this hypercritical? I would melt on the spot. I would, it would never ever sit right with me. So, that was long-winded, but that's
No,
how that
listen,
happened.
I loved hearing that. And when you talk about financial activism, how can we practice more of that, with our dollars? Someone will say, I have money, but I don't have that much money. What does my little dollar do? So what can we do in our everyday lives to stand up and speak up for ourselves, our community, our people, the world?
Of course. I always say, before we talk about financial activism, and I say this in the book, that it is not the end all be all answer. Like, the way you move your dollar is not the only thing that we need to focus on in financial activism. The giant asterisk over all of this is that there are folks in power, there are powers that be, that have so much more influence on our financial systems and on, like, just our systems in general. It's not that your dollar isn't important, but it's not all on you and your dollar to fix climate change. It's not all on you and your dollar to fix racism. It helps, but we almost have to do a parallel path. I'm thinking of, like, gas and brake. One side, you got to think about the fact that there are ways that we can influence those in power that don't have to do with our dollars, and put the accountability on those in power. The accountability is not all on us. So we're talking about the ways that you vote, the ways that you speak out against people in positions of power, the ways that you might boycott or strike against folks and hold back your dollar. There are ways that we actually need to put the focus on those of us who are in the billionaires of the world, like the stakeholders in the world. That's half of our work, is to put pressure on them to be like, you fix it. You can fix it for millions of us way faster than me and my dollar can. On the other side, there are ways that you can flex your own dollar, and that is financial activism. You can choose to put your dollar. I don't like necessarily, there's like boycotting and striking, and that works to hold your dollar power back and be like, I'm not giving you my money anymore. And there's also a lot of power in just being intentional about who you give your money to, looking around at the purchases you make every single day. Like in terms of clothing, there is someone who maybe is in your community, shares your identity, that's a struggling small business owner. You can buy your clothes from someone that has to do with your identity or community you're trying to help. You can buy your food from people that has to do with the community you're trying to help. There is so much that we can like joyfully give our dollars to, whereas it'd be like, I'm just getting a coffee from the corner store, whatever. I'm just getting a coffee from Starbucks. No, you can like be like, I got to know this sick small business that has been struggling through the pandemic, and I joyfully give my money to them now. Like now my whatever coffee like purchase is something that I'm like, no, I want these people to win. Now my whatever sweater purchase, my whatever gift purchase is like, I'm doing this intentionally because I want these people to win. And of course you could always be wonderfully financially petty too and be like, I'm taking my dollars away from this crappy financial institution. What I would request, and this is the reason I call it money out loud, is be loud about it. When you're leaving, when you're boycotting, when you're divesting from somewhere, talk about it. Tell that company you're leaving, tell the internet you're leaving, tell the folks that listen to you, your family and friends, that you're leaving. When you leave a place, I'm almost imagining like a cat that's just like walking around and knocking shit off the walls. And like, I'm like, that's what I want you to do when you're divesting or you're boycotting or you're saying like why you're not spending your money. And then turn around and tell people just as loudly why you're joyfully giving and joyfully spending in other places. There's so many ways that we can influence each other that both feels like deliciously petty and deliciously empowering at the same time. I hope that makes sense.
Oh my gosh, it does. And it's being intentional because when we talk about the how-tos and the tactical stuff when it comes to personal finance, sometimes it's all about
Yes.
like spending the least as possible or
Yes.
losing the least as possible, right? Mitigating
Mm-hmm.
risk. And, honestly, when we're trying to make headway or gain outside of just finances, some things
Mm-hmm.
that are intangible, right? So the opportunities that are out there for us to earn more, to get a different type of job, there's risk that needs to be taken, or for us to make the
Yes.
impact we want. Sometimes it can't be measured, or it's worth more than the 30 cents or dollar or $10 you'll save. Now, I'm
Yes.
not recommending this necessarily for people who are really struggling or at the poverty line, that they need to go, spend their last on something more expensive just because if it's going to hurt them and
Mm-hmm.
their lifestyle or their life. But I do feel like sometimes the emphasis is put on too much, like how we can spend as little as possible or mitigate risks versus we are at a place. Maybe this is also like one of those immigrant kryptonites, is that we don't never feel like we have enough, but sometimes we
Yes.
have more than enough or enough to do something different, right? Like sometimes
Mm.
I relate this to whether I should buy organic, like the difference between the organic produce, like is like 30 cents. Like I'll put it down sometimes if it's like 30 cents more.
Yeah.
And then I think back, like Jamila, seriously, like this, like the benefits of this potentially could be so much
Yes.
better than the 30 cents that you're saving. And sometimes I
Yes.
feel like our default sometimes is let's just save the money, mitigate the risk, or do, the least amount, where if we're trying to make an impact and change, and it's not about just the money. There's a bigger
Mm-hmm.
picture to see.
Yes, 100%. And a lot of that, of course, is I feel like this is the like flash word of all first gen like children of immigrants. It's a scarcity thing. It's the scarcity
Mm.
mindset. It's part of our default too. The parts that make up our like default dance in life are hustle. It's hustle, and then underneath that, it's scarcity mindset. We hustle because we feel like we have no choice. Because if you don't hustle, you're going to lose it all. And we save and we cut corners relentlessly because we don't know, we grew up a lot of the times in a situation where you didn't know when the next dollar was going to come. You didn't know how long it was going to last. You had to make it work. You had to make it like, you had to save it. You had to squeeze it. This squeezing and this, I'm going to default to the cheapest part is part of our, like how we learned how to protect ourselves. It's how our families learned how to protect us. It's how their parents learned how to protect them, squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. And now, again, with this like first gen alpha thing, you have to learn how to be different from like many, many generations before you, which is so hard. Like, we can talk for another 17 years about like generational traumas and how those things get passed down. And now, part of the pressure of being this first gen alpha kid is you're trying to change, you're trying to turn the car around after being stuck on this one path for like potentially hundreds of years. And scarcity mindset's one of the hardest things to let go of, because our instinct is just like, yeah, get the cheaper one. Don't be dumb. I could hear my mom in
Mhm.
my head being like, go to the clearance rack. Why are we here amongst the normal clothes? And then when we step into that like positions of privilege and earning more money and having a little bit more of that freedom, again, it's baby deer legs trying to practice not being scarcity mindset, trying to practice. It's not even like abundance manifestation. It's like, when I literally have the dollars to do that, what, it's my brain stopping me from these things. So much we can
Oh,
unpack.
oh, so much. But I know you unpack a lot of this in your book. So
I
I'm
do.
so excited for people to get this, to read this. So please talk more about the book, who you wrote it for, who should read it, and then like where they can find it.
Yes, of course. So my book is Money Out Loud. You can see it's a little washed out right now in this for those who can't see it, there's a giant Money Out Loud poster behind me. My book is called Money Out Loud. It's coming out on April 25th with HarperCollins. I was once upon a time embarrassed to say that it was coming out with HarperCollins because of the whole strike thing, but now I can say it with my chest because it came correct finally. April 25th, HarperCollins, but of course you can pre-order it anywhere that you get books. I very much stress that you pre-order it from an independent bookstore. Bookshop.org is an amazing resource to help you find the nearest independent bookstore to pre-order from. The book, oh goodness, it's called Money Out Loud, All the Financial Stuff No One Taught Us, because that's literally what it is. It is an interesting book in that it's technically categorized as a young adult book and a teen book, but I wrote this from the perspective of information that we all need, knowing that a lot of us got to adulthood with a teenage financial brain, with a child's
Mm.
financial brain, because we did not learn any of these things. And so I keep telling folks that this is for you as an adult and for you to be that cool adult that hands it to the kid that needs it. Like, this is the book that I wish my aunts or uncles or somebody handed to me when I was like 16 at the earliest. But it's something that you can learn from and read together and learn together. So it's for anybody who needs it, is what I say. I'm super psyched that it's coming out on April 25th. April, as we know, is Financial Literacy Month. And I cannot wait to be more obnoxious about it. Even though if you follow me on Instagram, which is at Hey Berna, you know I've been obnoxious about this thing for literally 2 years. So I feel like my community is like, birth the baby already. This is so annoying. But
Well,
it's coming.
we are all watching. We can't wait. We can't wait to see it out in the world. I'm so proud and excited for you,
Thank
Berna. And you're blazing the
you.
trail. You're like showing me, like, all right, you show behind the scenes, show how the sauce is made, and you're doing
Yes.
that perfectly with your content and with your brand and who you are. So much props to you, and thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jamila. It's like just my, I don't even know, I don't even have words for it. I'm just going to do this physical. You can't see me if you're listening to the podcast, but I'm just like, my heart to you, my heart to you, because we are all waiting and watching for your book as well. We're so psyched. And thank you so much for having me back on the show.
Oh, and by the way, this will be on YouTube, the video version of this interview. So you'll be able to see all of our expressions and hand movements and my ear, whatever this is falling out my ear. You'll get to see all that. All right.
Hanging out.
Thanks, Berna.
Thank you.